Good morning. I think this would be considered part four, but in lieu of going with the chronology of my life, I thought I'd take a second to talk a little bit about the Nordfit and the Wells family heritage. Um, as I've been thinking about my childhood years, I think the interfacing that I had with both sides of my parents' families were interesting, where I learned a little bit more about our family history, saw people that many of those have since passed, and trying to determine or detect what type of family traits are passed through the generations, which I think are interesting. I think that by the way that we're raised, a lot of that has to do with previous generations and the circumstances that the families lived in. Um, so if I could, I'd like to share some of that. I think it'll be quite interesting. My mom's side, they were Norwegians and they came over from Norway right before the turn of the last century and settled up in the Minnesota, North Dakota area, which was some of the harshest countryside in the United States at that time. It was known as the Far West, and they had frontier towns and very, very bitterly cold winters. It was hard to make a living up there, but for some reason, the Scandinavians, seemed to settle mostly up in that area, and that's where our family landed. There were two sides. There was the Nordfit side, which was my grandfather's family line, and there was the Seltfit family line. The Nordfits didn't seem to be a very close family. The Seltfits did, and in fact, we've stayed in contact with the Seltfits through the generations. There are many Seltfits still in Norway, and my mom went there to visit them, and I went there with April, and we had a chance to see our old family farm that is still in the Selfit family line, where the parents of my grandmother lived and came from. And we made great associations, saw pictures of family and stuff like that. And I think that it's interesting to see the homeland family, and then at the same time realize our roots in North Dakota, and the fact that they were pioneers, the fact that they left a country to have a new beginning, and had a very, very hard lifestyle, working dryland farms and pushing horses and turning over soil and milking cows early in the morning, and all of the hardships that come with that type of farming, which back then was even life threatening. Now with all of the science and the machinery and stuff, it's still tough, but it's quite a different environment than what people had back then. My what I know of my grandparents isn't really a whole lot. I didn't know my grandmother because she died when my mom was only I think 10 or 11. And my grandfather I met just two or three times, but very, very quickly didn't, to my knowledge, have any dialogue with him other than one night I stayed in his house. Um, uh, he had a small home. He would have been probably in his late 70s at the time. Kind of a man built a little bit like me. He was kind of bigger, broader, bigger chested, broader chest, shoulders, kind of a bigger head, and had a full head of white Santa Claus kind of hair, which, as you can tell, mine is going in that direction right now too. But anyway, understand he was a very, very hard worker, but when he lost his wife, Bertha, he probably always was drinking, but he started drinking pretty heavily, and that impacted his ability to work, and it had a big impact on my mom's family. They had, I think, eight sisters and one boy, and Glenn, the boy, died when he was about 10 or 11 of a ruptured appendix. They thought it was just a stomach ache, gave him some stuff to help with the stomach ache, and that exasperated uh, uh, the appendix issue. And before they could get him to the hospital, he ended up dying. That broke my grandmother's heart, and a year or so later, She died of a heart attack, I think, at a very young age too, in her early 50s. My other grandmother, my dad's mom, died when I think she was 48 on Thanksgiving Day. But Norwegians and people raised in that environment have a reputation for being good, hardworking people, family oriented, but kind of rough and tough, meaning somewhat unemotional, direct in their speaking. Um, and I think that's the environment that my mom was raised in. She was the second youngest. Aunt Connie was younger than her, but she was at the tail end of a lot of kids growing up, living through the Depression and having to work through the World War II period. And it was interesting times for everybody then. But my mom, when she was in high school, she knew that she needed to get out of North Dakota. She wanted to have a new and exciting life. And I think what happened was when she met my dad, who was from out of state and in the military and had a sharp uniform and stuff, she followed him down to Kansas City, and that's where they ended up getting married. But my mom's family, all of her sisters, good quality people, great cooks. They love to make Norwegian lefse and things like that. They're always very kind to me. But we didn't have much association with them. Our mom's family stayed in contact, but there wasn't a real gluing of the family unit that I observed more in my dad's family. A lot of that was proximity. Many of them moved out to Washington in order to work during World War II, and a couple sisters went down to California, my Aunt Connie. My mom married my dad. They began to move around, so there was little contact between the sisters other than letters and a few phone calls, and a family reunion or two where the cousins would all get together. And those were the moments that I remember. I remember driving from Kentucky all the way out to Spokane, Washington, and spending some time in North Dakota, meeting mom's family members. And years later, when I think Marcy would have been around 4 or 5 years old, they had another family reunion, which ended up being the last one that I'm aware of. And we have some pictures from that. I've posted some of those. And I had a chance to meet everybody and got to know my cousin Beth a little bit better then. And we've maintained that relationship through the years. But I'd say that the Nordfoot family, very Norwegian and strong in character, hardworking, but not quite as, I would say, touchy-feely, saying "I love you," things like that. Just wasn't really part of the family dynamics. My dad's side of the family is interesting. He was, I think, if I remember correctly, yeah, he was the last living sibling, and they had upwards of 11 and 12 living children. I don't know how many miscarriages that they would have had, but dad was, again, like my mom, on the lower end of the age, and a lot of his brothers, some of his brothers had kids that were older than he was. I remember that in some of the family reunions, so there was quite a spread of kids there. And his mom, Mary Alice Wells Long, or Mary Alice Long, who became Mary Alice Wells, she died at a very, very young age. She was a teeny lady. I bet she was just only 5 feet tall. But what's interesting about the Wells side, and this is part of what I wanted to share with you today, is just in one generation, my father was born in a cabin without running water. They had an outhouse. They had to hunt for their food. Most people had to work for pennies, nickels, quarters per day. I think that it was a rough life, but as my dad has said, that they didn't know anything different, so that was just life to them. It was surviving that way. But what I've observed, which is kind of interesting, I could see it more in my dad's family because we were around them more, and I'm sure that there's similar situations on my mom's side of the family too, but I can attest more to my dad's side of the family. But although they would be in today's standards quite uneducated, maybe some illiterate, I can see in what I observed in my dad and in my uncles and even in my aunts a survivor mentality, creativity, innovation, um, a lot of different things that I think caused them to be the kind of people that they were, and that my father became, and that I've been able to pick up on a little bit. I think there was a lot of interest in learning. There was a lot of creativity. I can remember stories that might not seem too indicative of what I'm talking about, but I do see it. They would talk about how to set up traps to catch animals, how to do it in a fun and sneaky way. You know, how to go hunting and where was the best shot on the animal. And they were great marksmen. They'd use 22s and go out and shoot squirrels and trees. I mean, the ability to do that is really something. They would talk about fishing and where to fish and how to fish, and they would build little mechanisms to try and find water. You know, the little sticks that people carry around, and supposedly they would dip where there was a water source beneath the land surface. I can remember my dad. In fact, I have a video of him showing me that at one point. But they would fix things if they couldn't buy it. They'd figure out how to make it. They were always able to work on their cars. As I mentioned, some of my uncles I think were illiterate, but they were creative enough to get through life and hold some pretty important positions without being able to read. That's hard for us to imagine, but that's what they did. My father, even with a fifth grade education, could spell horribly. April knows what his original spelling was like in stories that he would end up sharing with me about his life that we would reprocess, I guess, and put into his life story in the book that April and I did for him for Father's Day about 14 years ago in 2006, 2007 or something. Dad was an incredible storyteller, and that came out in the things that he shared with us about his life, and it really shows forth in the little book called My Dad, My Hero, which I did an introduction in, but the balance of the book is pretty much Dad just sharing his life story. But his brothers, Uncle Trenton, Uncle Teeman, Uncle Rumsey, we would sit around and they would love to reminisce about the past, and they'd tell jokes about things that they had done to each other or to other people, or fights that they had had, or stories about just living where they lived. And it was always so interesting just to sit and listen to them because it was very entertaining. It was storytelling to the 10th degree. And I do have some videos of that I've shared in the hard disk drive that I'm sharing with everybody about genealogy and video and family stories and stuff that I'll put. One is Uncle Teeman's experience in World War II when he took out some bunkers and received the Purple Heart and some courage awards. I don't remember the exact names of the medals. He even received a medal from the President of France, which is really quite an interesting background. Kentucky boys were really famous for being the gunners and the sharpshooters throughout different wars because of the fact they lived off the land, as I mentioned earlier. But all of the Welleses also were quite religious people in different ways that they practiced them. My dad never went to church, but I do know that he read the Bible at times, and I can remember one time he told me, he said, "Jeff, I don't care what religion you are or want to become," when I was telling him about joining the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but he said, "Jeff, you choose what you want to choose, but just remember, don't be a hypocrite. Whatever values you decide to live under whatever religion, live them. Just don't be a hypocrite. He said he respected people that lived their morality more than pretended to be something that they weren't. And I've always thought about that through the years and people that I've observed. And I have friends that are Baptists, cousins that are Baptists. My cousin Ronnie, who's a Baptist preacher, great close lifelong friends, and Carlos Mayer, who's an avid Catholic. Um, but they live their religion, and I think that their character is such that I'm drawn to them because they are true and faithful to the beliefs that they have. I've always been impressed with that. Um, so the Welleses were people that would belong to local Baptist or Baptist-like congregations in their area. They would walk to church throughout the year in good or bad weather. They would sing in choirs. They would help other people, and I think that sense of serving others, believing in a higher deity, being reverent to things, being committed again, helped me as I've decided and have lived and have gained great opportunity through the things that I've learned in the gospel, through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the testimony that I have of things that are so important to being happy in life. It seems like, especially on my dad's side, is that they were a happy people because they were living a committed life to good causes. And I think in life people can choose things that cause them to be unhappy because they somehow society pressures us to choose bad things to be happy, when in reality, when you choose good things, you are happier. You don't need to choose bad things. You don't need to go in the wrong or the bad direction. I've always been fortunate in that throughout my life, for one reason or another, I think some things that I've just learned and things I picked up from people that I respect is we don't have to become friends with or have associations with or do business with people that we don't trust or we don't respect in any way. We can just walk away from it. We don't have to do it. If we make those decisions to stay away from bad people, our lives are much better. So, but I'll share some more things about the families and stuff as well. But I just thought I'd take this time to share a little bit about our roots and how the character of our families have been created. We come from good stock that without good medication and doctors and things like that lived very long lives into their 80s and sometimes much longer. And people that have suffered through some horrible historic events, the flus of the 1916s, 17s and stuff, World War I, World War II, Korean War, political downturns, all the different things back when it would have been much more difficult to having had passed through those particular things. But my dad's interest in doing things, learning up till the day that he died, I think that curiosity, that inventiveness is something that I hope passes through all of our future generations. I'm here in my painting room because I wanted to show you something really quick. My dad just loved to learn things. This is a painting that he did. And if you look at it carefully, there's a lot of thought being put into it, perspective, color. He wasn't a painter, didn't take classes. Above that is a painting, my first painting that I did on my mission. I watched somebody paint and did the same thing. And from there, I've kind of tinkered with it. I've never delved into it directly, but I've enjoyed just trying different things. And here on this shelf, I've collected kind of historic family memento type things. When April and I went to Norway. We picked up this doily from one of our ancestors, and I picked these Dutch shoes up in Holland, and this is a wagon that my dad made from hand, and just little knickknacks through the years. This is something else that my dad made. He liked to build things, bird houses and chicken coops and rabbit cages, and he was really good about that. Around Christmas, he would make Christmas displays, cut them out of wood, and put them in his front yard, and people would drive by and look at his handiwork, and that was part of the reputation he had. So that was wonderful. But anyway, thanks for taking the time to listen to this segment and to understand a little bit more about, at least on my side, my family heritage that passes through some of you in the future.